Alright, so this last video will be a little bit shorter because there's not much for new information. It's just that our last exercise is called Colorizing an Image, and there's two different PSDs here. This one just has some more instructions, and it's set up a lot like the image repair one, where there's two pictures and a bunch of notes at the bottom. I'm going to be using the other one because it's just the picture. And you can use any black and white picture you want, actually. You don't have to use this one. But the idea here is to non-destructively, right? Completely different than everything we've been doing before up to this point, is to non-destructively add color to this. So I've added a new layer, and I'm going to set it to color all the way down at the bottom, or second to last one says color. And I can set its opacity a little bit lower. We can play with that later. You can play with different layers with this if you want. But then what I'm going to do is make sure I'm on layer 1. There we go. And we're going to create a selection, right? So I always start with this giant darker leaf right here because it's kind of easier to see. Nope. I'm going to use a combination of tools. I'm going to start with the quick select tool. It does an okay job. I'm going to have to fix things. Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, I will be not fixing things as much as you should, because time. So you can see that even undoing it a little went too far. So now I'm going to use the magic wand tool. I'm going to bring this down to like 12 or something small, and I'm going to hold down. There we go. So it's getting closer, right? And you can spend a little bit of time selecting this and not... Nope. Don't be afraid to get in close to get those last few pixels. So if you're thinking to yourself, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be spending all this time on this, and then, like, I won't even have it back again. Well, actually, what I'm going to show you what to do, excuse me, deals with being able to save your selections. Now, I'm coming in here because one of the things that I will notice if I don't, and it will drive me crazy, is that that selection went a little bit too far. Nope, just kidding. There we go. You can stick with just the eraser tool instead of going to the brush tool if you reverse the colors, and it will erase to black instead of to white. So I want to take rid of all that. Nope. The light areas that are clearly supposed to be for the other leaf. And when I say light areas, I mean areas that are not pink, not areas that would belong to a lighter leaf. There we go. And I also need to look for that because it happened to me in class. So my eyes aren't that good necessarily. Okay, so let's say I've spent all this time and I've, fixed up this image and its selection. It's amazing, and it took me like 10 minutes. And do I really want to lose this ever? No. So I'm going to show you how to save a selection. So I'm going to go to Select, and then Save Selection. I'm going to call this large front leaf. The key here is that you kind of have to remember what things are called, and this particular image is not very good at that because there's like 72 leaves, and even if you do them in chunks, you have to remember which chunk you're talking about. So I saved that selection. So let's say I go do other things, and then I want to paint that selection. So I'm going to go to layer 2. Now I'm going to go to Select, Load Selection, and it's going to say Channel, Layer 2 Transparency. I'm going to say Nope, Large Front Leaf, and I get it back. So you can spend time being careful because you're going to save it and you're going to have it for later. And now I can reverse this and grab a paintbrush and choose a better color than that. And now if you choose a darker color, all that's going to happen is that these... I'll show you. I'm going to choose a really dark color just as a example. Now first off, yep, my brush is at 100%. I'm going to paint that in there. A few things. One, I can go outside the lines because the selection is holding me in place. That's why we're selecting things, right? Because it's going to do this. And you can see the more careful you are with your selection, the less bleed you'll have. You can see a little bit of bleed on the places, right? So you want to be more careful. But because I set the layer to less than 100%, that's why it looks a little grayed out. So one of the things controlling how saturated this will be isn't your color picker necessarily, it's what you do with this, right? So if I turn down the opacity way down, it's only going to be mildly tinted blue. The other thing is that the lightness is being controlled by the leaf itself. So I could have, let me get that back here, that selection. So I can choose a brighter version of that color and it will change it. Actually, no, that's the wrong thing. No, it's not. But not in necessarily the way that you think. There we go. See, those dark areas are still pretty dark. The dark areas now look like the original color I had, right? They still look like the dark areas still kind of stay the same. The only thing that changes is that some of the lighter areas will look a little bit brighter. Whereas because I chose a dark color to begin with in this version, this is why we have the redo, undo, redo, undo. So you can see that the light areas are really changing, but the dark areas are not. So what happens is, if I choose a darker color, it's actually, nope, there we go. It's just that this is, it looks almost like more grayscale, like there's more color where there's darkness. So it's playing with color a little bit differently than before. All right, so then I, hit Control D, and then I go back to my layer 1. Now, the purpose of this assignment, a couple things. One, you have to stay organized. You can work on this same layer all the time if you would like, because you're saving your selections. So if I go over here, right, and actually I can just go to one of these lighter leaves. Just kidding. I have to be on the right layer. There we go. So I can work on this lighter leaf on the same layer as the blue one as long as I always save my selections. Because I can always load them back up. And so I can make this, I don't know, orange. I always liked orange. And I find my brush. I do this. And I can always change the blue again easily just by loading that selection. So you don't necessarily have to keep lots of different layers. The only reason I would keep different layers, and I might, is if I wanted to control them differently. See, I forgot to put a color mode on. So these blend modes here have different ways that they'll color things in. Color means that it's only going to take color information from that layer, and then everything else will be not color information. Or all the light information will come from the black and white photo. Whereas like color burn, you can see that it's actually changing the lightness and darkness of the image. Oh, just kidding. Color. There we go. So the reason I might have these on separate layers, even though they're both in color mode, is that for this darker color, I might want to punch up the color a little bit by turning the opacity up. But for this one, if I turn the opacity up that much, that's really orange. Different colors and different lightnesses and darknesses might react differently. So I could paint all the dark leaves and like her lips and things that are darker on one layer and add like a certain richness of color. And then I can paint light colors or light things on another layer and treat the opacity a little bit differently. And if I ever decide, oh, I really need this to be on a third layer or whatever, because I've saved my selections, I can always move stuff around more easily. So it's about staying organized, it's about saving your selections, and it's about tinkering a little bit with these layers if you want to kind of push yourself. If you're just like, oh my gosh, I can barely handle this, and you want to keep all your color on one layer, then that's okay. But if you're really looking to get like, the A pluses in this class and kind of push yourself a little bit, then, tinker with using multiple layers. All right. And like I said, you don't have to use this photo. It just has to be a photo that is black and white. If you download a photo from somewhere else, first of all, make sure you know that it's like copyright free. Second of all, you're going to put a link. When you go to submit everything, it's all going, nope, here we go. So week 5 submission, and you're going to submit it, and you're going to write into the comments section what the link is, so that I know that it's okay. The other thing you're going to do is, let's see, oh yeah. So sometimes when you grab black and white photos from wherever, they might be in black and white mode. There are technically different modes for images. So if you go to if you can't paint every time, if you go to select a color and it turns out gray, image mode, you'll see that it's in grayscale, not technically black and white, but grayscale. Switch it to RGB color. Stay with RGB because that's better for digital images. You have more range of color than you would with CMYK, and also that's just kind of standard. If you send stuff to the photographer to be printed, they use RGB too. By the way, it's grayscale and not black and white, because black or white is an indexed thing, right? It's like an on or an off, whereas grayscale is a gradient from black to white. From a digital art perspective, there is a difference between those things. So I keep saying black and white, but really it's a grayscale image. All right, and if you have any questions, please email.